Good evening, everyone. I'm Mark Meister, the Executive Director of the Museum of Russian Art, and it's my pleasure to welcome you here tonight for a very special program. This evening, we're privileged to have with us Raymond Johnson, the founder of the museum, and Pamela Safar, former board chair of the museum. And they're here to discuss the early years of the museum and how it came about and other topics. And one of those other topics will be how Geli Korzhev, the very important Russian artist, was introduced to an American audience by Raymond Johnson and the implications of that. Now, to help us with that tonight, we have here our curator, Dr. Masha Zaviolova, who I will now hand the microphone to.
Good evening, everyone. I'm very happy to see so many familiar faces here. And today we have this very special night. So the founder of the museum, Ray Johnson, and Pam Safar, the former board chair, are with us. And we had this event before with Ray and Pam, but today it's special in another way. Today is 100, the anniversary of the birth of Geli Korzhev. And there is a connection here, connection between Ray and Geli. Ray put together his collection in the 90s and early 2000s, and eventually it became clear that his collection is like no other. It became the largest and most important collection of 20th century Russian paintings outside Russia. So the biggest and most important in the world. And sometimes people ask, so why is this museum here? This museum is here, and it's the only museum of Russian art at this point, is because Ray Johnson lives here, and he established his museum here versus New York. And there was an idea to establish this museum in New York at first, but you know, New York has so many museums, all kinds of museums. And here we are special, we stand out. People come to our museum from all over the country. We receive donations to this museum from all across the United States. And one of the pieces we received is Geli Korzhev's piece. This is part of the triptych, and this is another Geli Korzhev here. And this was given to our museum by Ray and Susan Johnson. So Geli Korzhev was born in 1935. And he was a very Soviet artist, by the way. He lived in Moscow. He was the chair of the Moscow Union of Soviet Artists, which means he conformed to all the requirements of the Soviet art establishment. He was an official artist. But he chose to tread his own path. So he did paint communists. I remember in my childhood, I had a book on art. It was like one volume, History of World Art. Everything from Egyptians to contemporary artists. And one of the illustrations was Geli Korzhev's painting. I still remember it from my school years. And he is probably one of the most important Soviet artists of the 20th century Russian art. And it became clear also not right away. It's only in the last probably 20 years that his genius is beginning to emerge, because he is different from many Soviet artists. He tried to get to the truth of Soviet life without vanishing it. Some of his characters are, you know, like an old war veteran who is not wealthy, who lives in a humble home, sleeps under a like patchwork blanket that's put together by his wife from old clothing. And this painting was shown here. I still remember it, just so remarkable. It's called The Old Wounds. So she sleeps the old soldier cannot sleep because he thinks about back his life, probably war years and all of the post-war years. And it's not about, varnishing Soviet reality, like making it look beautiful and glorious. No, it's about these intimate moments in the lives of these people who we call Soviet people, but they're just people. And when you look at Geli Korzhev's paintings, that's what you realize. So Ray actually visited Geli Korzhev's studio 60 times. They became friends. And even though Ray doesn't speak Russian, they still friends. And Geli Korzhev, at once, he said that he was actually very grateful to Ray because he acquired some of his paintings, and that allowed him to create, to work on more paintings without having to think about financial hardship, which she would have had to go through in the 90s. The 90s, post-Soviet Russia, everything is collapsing. The economy is in a very bad shape. And with the help from Ray, he could paint wonderful, wonderful paintings that are now the treasured possessions of the biggest and most important museums in Russia. And also, collectors of Russian art across the world are hunting down his paintings. There are not a lot around. And Ray still has some, and some people still approach him trying to get these paintings. But we are not selling. We are not selling our paintings, and we are not selling Korzhev. So I'm immensely grateful to Ray Johnson, not just because he gave us these wonderful paintings of Korzhev's, but because he did something unique and very important. So now, and you know what kind of a time it is, it's war and between Russia and Ukraine, a very difficult time. A lot of museums who had the word Russian in their name canceled it, so renamed themselves. Now they are all kinds of international museums of art. So we are the only museum of Russian art, and we have this human link with people here and in Russia through art, which is really important, no matter what, to keep these cultural connections going. It's important to talk. As you know, from all kinds of human experience, unless you talk, nothing happens. You have to talk to people when you are fighting with them. Countries have to talk. Otherwise, the end is really bad. So, and that's what this museum does. It's the only place that, the cultural art place, that keeps that conversation going. And it's not just like actually people talking to people, it's just this art talks to us, talks to even, across the world. So Ray, thank you so much. And really, it's such a unique place. You did such a great thing. You probably don't even realize how important the thing is that you've done in your life. And with this, I would like Pam and Ray to start talking. And I'm sure we will learn new things from.
When I heard that you were going to be paying to come here, I got a little nervous. But when Masha talks, I knew you were getting your money's worth before I even started. So the pressure's off me because I can't keep up with Masha. She's incredibly invaluable to us here at the museum, and she knows
and
that
Ray brought Masha to the museum in addition to
that was the best thing I did. Yeah.
So if we come to the museum today, we see this lovely building and great art, but it's hard to truly appreciate what Ray created, why he created it, and what the path to this was, how he got from where he began to this building and this situation. Ray, tell us a little bit first about when you were growing up, where you were born, and what your early years of life.
I was hoping you wouldn't say grown up. Because anybody that knows me very well knows that I didn't really ever grow up, and I don't plan to either. So um, I was born into a farm family. My father was a dairy farmer, and we lived in a little town about 9 miles north of Mason City, Iowa. And he milked cows and bottled the milk. And my mother, who had difficulties walking because she was a polio victim, and but an absolutely wonderful person. 4 months later, or 5 months later, after after I was born, then my father died. And so that's a question that a lot of people ask me: what did your father do? And did he have a big part, um, in helping you start collecting art? The closest we ever came to having any art on our walls was a catalog or a calendar that came from the Dairy Association with pictures, and we carefully turned them each month and enjoyed those pictures. I grew up in pretty much a one-room apartment with a wonderful mother, so I had a great life. I grew up, or I was raised, I better say, uh, in Mason City, went to Mason City High School. Um, Following that, I went to Carthage College in Carthage, Illinois, which was a Lutheran church school at the time. That school now is in Kenosha, Wisconsin on Lake Michigan.
Before that, though, Ray, or during those years,
Yes.
if I recall correctly, you had very significant entrepreneurial leanings from a very young age.
Yeah. I was, even though I was born in a Mason City hospital, and I was the first of 3 children to be born in the hospital. I lived in a little town called Manly, Iowa. And if you don't know where Manly is, you probably know where Fertile is. That's 2 miles from Manly. And it's kind of an important place because the press has a good time every time a manly man marries a fertile woman. So, what did you ask me?
I wanted you to tell us about a couple of your early entrepreneurial.
Oh, you're talking about making arrows.
I
aren't you?
am talking
Okay.
about that for one.
I was very interested in archery when I was young. And the band director in my junior high was also. And another gentleman who I'll talk about a little later um, was also interested in archery. And sometimes we would go to competitions and I might win the young people's division, and they might sometimes win the senior divisions, and so we had a good time. They kind of took care of me, it seemed to me, as I look back. They gave me opportunities that I might not have had. And so one of them taught me how to make arrows, and I made a dozen, and that's what I was planning to do, is just to make a dozen arrows. Well, if you come from Mason City, you're not supposed to do anything small. And so I decided that I was going to make enough so that I could start selling them. And I was 15 years old, and my mom arranged for me to get the basement, which was a very damp, dank place where you enter by flipping a door open
outside.
and walking down some cement stairs.
The cellar.
And I decided to make a number of arrows and see if I could sell them. And so I started selling them to a local sporting goods store. To make a long story short, we ended up selling to 12 different sporting goods stores. And we made thousands, literally thousands of arrows. So,
At 15,
beg your pardon?
when you were 15 years old.
Yes, when I was 15. But I sold the business when I was 17 because I went to college. But that was kind of good for me. I learned an awful lot doing that. And one of the things that led into it was a guy by the name of W.A. Storer, Bill Storer, Storer. And he was the one who came along when, do you know the story about the Music Man?
Yeah.
Well, that was written by our high school band director. And he also
The
wrote
music was written or the whole
play.
story?
Yeah.
Oh,
And that has been a Hollywood, or I mean a
Broadway.
what am I trying?
Broadway.
Broadway success. And it was about a man who came to Mason City and some of the small towns around Mason City and sold them instruments. That's the story of the Music Man. And he promised then to teach them lessons. And so there were something like, dozens and dozens of little towns where they were training the children to use their instruments. And actually, they then fed into the high school band eventually. So that high school band was especially noteworthy. They had a national competition for high school bands, and Mason City won it 18 years in a row.
Oh my
and then they
gosh.
stopped the competition.
Wow.
So it kind of goes back to a good thing that the Music Man who came to town and sold the instruments and then went left by the dark of night to the next place where he started selling instruments.
Are you segueing into selling arrows somewhere else? No.
I'm probably mixing this all up.
No.
But
How did you move from that to Lutheran minister?
when I went to college, I had intended to be a musician. I started being trained as a singer when I was 12, and I continued to be trained as a singer until I was 22.
And Ray, your sons and grandsons are also musicians.
Yes,
Yeah.
they are.
Lovely.
And they've had their day in the sun with Warner Brothers Records, but one of them, Douglas, has worked with me for 30 years in helping me bring paintings from Russia. So where did you go?
Sorry, I interrupted you. You were working on telling us about becoming a Lutheran minister. You had planned to be a musician.
Yeah, can I go back to arrows again?
Sure.
Okay, when you make an arrow, you have to have a feather, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So W.A. Storer, who not only was the one who came along and taught all the young people to play their instruments over a period of like 30 years, he retired in 1949. That was a year, and they gave him a car. I remember it. I was in the 6th grade, and that's when the Fords were They looked like you didn't know which way they were going because they looked the same in the front and in the back. And they brought that into the gymnasium. They presented it to him. What he did then afterward was to start cutting turkey feathers into the feathers that could be used for arrows. And so he worked for a sporting goods, let's see, I'm going to try to remember the name of the company. Anyway, he sold thousands and thousands and thousands, like tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of feathers to a company that made arrows in Grayling, Michigan. And so this is getting to what I did as a job. I went to him once and I said, you know, I know that you take turkey feathers when at the hatchery, and you take the white wings. There's four feathers on each wing, which could be used for an arrow because there's only feather on one side of the quill, and it's a strong quill that might. They never take flight exactly, but and so they would be at the hatchery. They would clip off all the wing feathers, and they would be in big barrels. They would bring them to him, and he had a staff of 3 women who would sort them right from left. Okay, so I came one day and knocked on his door, and I said, Mr. Storer, I hear you sometimes hire people for working with your feathers. Could I get a job? And he said, well, so he took me out into the place, and it was an old school bus that had been everything was taken out of the school bus. A table there with these 3 women sorting feathers. So I said, how much do they sort in a day? Like, well, they usually do about 1,000 feathers an hour.
An hour?
1,000 feathers an hour. Yes. Sorting them right from lefts. So I said, would you be willing to give me $1,000 instead of $1 an hour? Because they made $1 an hour for sorting 1,000 an hour. And he said, yeah. Well, anyway, I figured out how to do it. I made $7 an hour when I was in high school. And at that time, most of my friends were making about 65 cents an hour. So that kind of got me going with arrows, and that's why you talk about it being entrepreneurial. I have, I guess, a little bit of entrepreneurial
A little.
bent.
Just a little. But
that was until I was 17.
But Ray, then you know, becoming a Lutheran minister is very far away from entrepreneurial enterprises.
You might say, yes. I thought I was going to be a musician. I had 2 opportunities, Roger Wagner chorale or Robert Shaw chorale. I looked at that. I was trained. I knew I could do it. Then I got to thinking that, you know, there's a concert, and then you go to a hotel and sleep. Then you get onto a bus and you go to the next concert. And then you go to a hotel and you get up next morning and go to the next place. I don't know why it didn't occur to me earlier, but it finally did, and I decided to become a minister instead. So that's what my mother wanted me to do anyway. And so I did.
How long were you a Lutheran minister?
I was the Lutheran minister for 13 years. And then I was 5 years in Crosby, Ironton. Anybody know where that is?
Oh, yeah.
In Crosby, Ironton, it's a place where a lot of people go to retire because they maybe have a cabin up there and they end up retiring. So I did about 250 funerals in a 5-year period. That took a lot of starch out of me, but it also was one of the best experiences of my life. And so then I moved to a parish in Navarre. You know where Navarre is? Um, and I served there for 8 years. And then I had so many feelings about the providing of funerals, and so many ideas that I thought, I'm going to write a book on the subject. So I took a 3-year sabbatical to write a book on the not that I was interested in mortuary science in any way, shape, or form. I was interested with counseling people who were in grief, and so
You wrote the book?
so I started to write the book. Then I started advertising, some of my ideas, and the industry didn't like my ideas too much because, and I don't, I know that I run the risk always of somebody coming from a family or maybe even owning a funeral home, and I don't mean to say anything negative about that, but I had ideas coming from the towns that I served that there was a lot that could be done. So I decided that I would advertise in the paper. So I had full-page pads talking about how people should be treated at the time of death. Now that was kind of a crazy thing to do, but I guess it's part of that entrepreneurial thing. And so then I'm getting somewhere on this, don't think. Don't give up. You can go to sleep if you want to, but don't give up on me here.
We are moving to Russian art, right?
So yes, we are, but you're still talking about this entrepreneurial thing, and you shouldn't have said that.
They're the same.
And so anyway, somebody said, if you know so much about funeral provision, why don't you buy a funeral home of your own? Like, I'll tell him, So I thought, well, it wasn't a bad idea. So I bought a funeral home, the one in Wyzetta, for example. That was the first one. The second one was in St. Louis Park. And the third one was here, in this building. So I got there, didn't I?
You got
I
there.
got there.
Excellent.
It just took a while, is all. But anyway, that's
it was
the
super interesting.
connection that I said to my partner that we'd had in making this over the first time into a beautiful place, because the building had been kind of stagnant.
No, but Ray, you must have started collecting art before you made a museum.
No, after, yeah. So
Who would have thought?
yeah. So I said to my partner, do you suppose that building that we sold, the funeral
Put them
home, because it sold to a conglomerate and the conglomerate went broke?
Ray,
Yes.
move the mic.
Oh, it was sold to a conglomerate and the conglomerate went broke. And I said, do you think that building might be for sale? He said, well, I'll check it out. So he called me the next day and he said, I've got good news and bad news. Tell me the good news first. It's for sale. The bad news, it sold yesterday. So I said, well, who did it sell to? And they said it sold to a funeral director. No, I'm sorry. It sold to a realtor. I said, well, then the realtor plans to sell it again. So let's contact him. He paid $500,000 for it. 2 days later, I paid him $1 million for it. So this
Who's
is
the
the building we
entrepreneur?
started. Who said I was so good at that stuff? So anyway, I wanted to say that because I don't think I've ever said that to anybody until tonight, that's how we got this building. And I just think that it then began an entrepreneurial venture that is the best I've ever had.
And how did that start? What originally interested you in art and then in Soviet era art?
We had a gallery in Scottsdale, Arizona, and we ran that for about 35 years. And we lived in Scottsdale about 4 or 5 months out of the year. And we thought that when we thought about, things were starting to open up in Russia.
But that gallery was selling other kinds of art, not Russian.
Yes. It was selling a Western artist by the name of Olaf Weghorst, who ended up selling in the millions. But most of it was Southwest art. And we also then sold a rural America artist by the name of Gary Ernest Smith. And we represented him for 35 years. And we were pretty successful with all the artists that we represented. And then what do you want to know?
How did that move to Russian art?
Okay, we thought that we needed inventory for our gallery. And we thought about Russia, didn't know anything about Russian art.
And this was in the early 90s?
Yes, well, actually, it was in the late 80s that we started researching. We figured, they have the best ballet, some of the best singers, some of the best poets and composers, and
novelists,
why wouldn't
authors,
they have some great artists?
dancers, dancers, novelists. I mean,
oh yeah. And so we went there, and if you can imagine this, let's say you're a Russian, and you go to the United States, and you get off the bus in New York, and you say, "I'm here to buy American art," and you're here to buy American art. So you get in a cab, and he asks you why you're here, and you say, "Well, I'm here to buy American art." "Oh, I've got somebody. I know somebody. I can take you to him right now in my cab."
sure.
So they had all kinds of ideas, and it happened in Russia. As soon as you mentioned that you might be there to buy art, even the cab driver had all kinds of ideas for you. But obviously, it isn't going to be that easy. So what we did was we decided that since we knew nobody and didn't have the kind of connections with the ambassadors and different people that we ended up having, the museum, the museums that we became connected to soon. Well, when you guys get to be, well, let's see, Dr. E, you were 87 and you weren't having any difficulty talking 5, 6 years ago.
So you were in Russia saying, how do we go about this?
Okay, so what I did, I decided that the smartest thing to do would be to get the
Did you turn it off by mistake?
experts. Do I have it?
Yep.
Okay. So we hired 12 art historians from the various parts of the Soviet Union. And everybody had a different opinion about who were the best artists of the period. But we didn't want to know just the best 10. We wanted to know the top 100. And so we worked on that, and those took 2 or 3 trips before we got it worked down to finally the top 10, and then eventually the top 5 is where we started. And that was Korzhev, Stajaro, Gritsai, right over there, Nechitailo, and the Tkachev brothers, yeah. I was going to ask you, Dr. E. We call him Dr. E, but his name is Dr. Engstrom. And he comes and has coffee with us. Used to be a couple times a week, and he comes clear from Northfield and has a wonderful collection of his own. You could have a collection too if you wanted it. I could maybe even help you.
So you had the information or lists or input from these experts.
Right. And it turns out that the 5 that we started with really were probably the most important ones. And so we started buying heavily of those. For
From
example,
the artists personally
well,
at their
from the artists
studios.
themselves. Except for, say, Nechitailo. He was dead before we came to Russia. He died, I think, in the 60s. We bought 250 of his paintings, and we're very glad that we have them.
Had anyone else gone to visit these Russian artists and talk to them about buying their art?
There were people who came from France. There were people who came from Spain and Italy. Those were the 3 main ones. The UK. And the thing that we had going for us is that we didn't ever try to take advantage of them. There was a lot of talk about how you could take advantage of them because they had never dealt with money before.
There had been no market for their art during the Soviet era.
It was, the art actually belonged to the government.
Yeah.
They didn't really belong to the artists. But when Perestroika came along, the paintings were allowed to be sold by the artists. If they had it in their possession, they could keep it.
For the first time.
For the first time, yes. And so,
Lucky timing or great timing.
yeah, and the most important artist, as Masha talked about tonight, was Geli Korzhev. And we, as she said, visited him 60 times.
How many times did you go to Russia to buy art, Ray?
Over 100. And
over what period of time? About how many years?
37 years. Over 37 years, we went personally to visit Geli Korzhev 60 times, and we visited Russia over 100 times.
And you brought money and bought paintings and brought them back.
Yes.
How did you do that?
Very carefully. And when we would buy paintings, it wasn't like we could take them and roll them up and go home. First of all, we never rolled paintings, because rolling, you roll it with if you ever rolled one, it would be with the paint side out. And you always see in movies, somebody rolling up like they were rolling up a shade or something. But we didn't want to roll paintings. And so we had to go through the process. We would decide what paintings we wanted to buy. We would pay the artist. Our staff there, and we had a staff of 4, they would take them to the Minister of Culture and make 5 photographs of each one of the paintings and give it to the various divisions that had an interest in it in Russia. And we wouldn't see the paintings for about at least 2 months. It might be 3 or 4 months before we got them.
They were not framed.
And they were not framed. The reason, they might have been framed when we bought them, but we would take the frames off because they were generally handmade by the artists. And we would even take it off the stretcher bars, if an oil painting on canvas, take it off the stretcher bars and stack them with non-acidic paper in between to keep them free of any degradation. And then we would send them have them shipped and crated by our staff, but then they would take them to the shippers and then they would be responsible for shipping them. If the painting was very large, like maybe this Geli Korzhev here would fall in that category. If it won't fit into, by the time it's crated, if it didn't fit into a 747 or a DC-10 storage underneath, then we would go to ship it by truck to Germany and use Tiger Airlines. And Tiger Airlines is, you know, the one that opens up like that and you drive a tank into it or a Jeep or whatever and carry the very large ones.
How did you pay the artists? Everyone wants to know that, right?
Yeah. And we always paid them in cash. We had a hard time at first talking about it because they always seemed to want to be secretive about that. I'm not sure it was even legal all the time in Russia to take hard currency from other countries. But we would always have cash on us. And the next question you're going to ask is, how did we get the cash over there?
And like in a briefcase?
On a roll bag. I would have put my clothes in there. You maybe have the idea that if you were going to take $1 million, that it would take a steamer trunk to put it in. That's if it was $1 bills, maybe. But you can put $1 million worth of $100 bills into a shoebox, almost. Not quite the right configuration, but approximately that. And so we can get it through customs here in the United States. Didn't seem to have any trouble with that at all. When we got there, we were worried. So we had to make plans for how we got it from the plane or from the terminal into a cab. So we had 4 people who worked for us, and they would each come to the airport with a roll bag, and it was the same roll bag that I carried. They were all matching. And we would put the money in from our bag. It was like, which shell is the pea under, you know? And so we moved the bags around amongst the 5 of us so long that I'm sure that nobody could keep track of which one had the money in it. And so, what else you want to know about that?
That's amazing. So then all this art came back here, and you had conservationists that were taking care of it.
We had 13 staff at the time through the thick of this.
This is still not the museum. This is at your gallery. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, we're not that far yet, are we?
Well, I'm just saying the conservators were at the gallery.
Yes, you're right. They were at the gallery. And so we would work on them. I say we loosely because I never did. And by the way, some of you might think that I'm an artist and I can't draw a stick man. But you know, there's one side of the brain that does one thing and there's another side of the brain that does another thing. And neither parts of my brain would lend it to being an artist. And it also didn't lend it to a lot of the things that we had to do, like shipping and framing. Uh, uh, those were all things that had to be done by somebody else, not me.
But almost suddenly, there were 10,000 pieces of Russian art, the largest private collection of Soviet art in the world outside of Russia, in South Minneapolis.
How did that happen?
That's why we're here. How did that happen?
Yeah. You know, and it is hard for me with my memory kind of going. And it's hard for me to think back how we really did that. It's true that has been hard
How many
for me.
pieces of art were there when you decided to open a museum, and what drove the decision to say, let's have a museum?
Well, there were a lot of conversations at home. You're gonna what? You're gonna buy how many? You're gonna. So
If Susan was here, she
Yeah.
could tell us about those.
yes, she could tell you about that. But she was with me many times and had her own collections. And Masha, would you tell them just a little bit about what
About
Susan's
Susan's
collections are?
textile collections and
The
costumes.
things that she collected. That's
So
been donated to the museum.
while Ray was visiting artists, Susan was hunting folk art. So she found a passion of her own. So she became an independent collector, and she got in touch with some people as far as Vologda, the Russian north. She would travel there. She met a local collector, Mikhail Surov, who was a businessman and he was like a primary source for her. And she put together a remarkable collection of folk art. It was donated to us, the entire collection, and we recently had an exhibition, and even I'm sure some Russian museums don't have some of the beautiful pieces that she has, like from the northern town of Kargopol. The hand embroidery from the late 19th, early 20th century. Really rare because, you know, with the industrialization and modern age, people just stopped doing it. No one is doing it. No one was doing it even in the mid 20th century. So Susan really found some very rare pieces, and it's a great collection of embroidery, costumes, some wood carvings, and just a very different one from Ray.
Explain to them what window surrounds are.
Yeah, they even, the Ray and Sue Johnson ended up having a collection of window surrounds. And I think no one has these in the United States. So Russian peasant houses, quite often and in many areas, the windows are decorated with wood carvings from outside, not inside, but outside. And these are not shutters. So some areas have window shutters, but these were just decorative pieces, quite ornate. And about probably 6 to 7 years ago, we had an exhibition here and we showed almost all of those window surrounds. They're pretty large. Some of them are like 10 feet high and very heavy. So it's quite a unique collection.
Yeah, somebody brought them first, made a big collection of window surrounds and brought them to somewhere in London, I can't remember. And so I think now you could say that the museum here has probably the only collection of window surrounds outside the Soviet Union, except for the one who did collect them, but we bought them from them and donated them to the museum. Yeah.
So I interrupted you saying that there were plenty of conversations at home about
Yeah,
the
well,
museum.
she and I sat a lot of times and talking about what to do with the thousands of paintings that we had. And I suppose we had 7 or 8,000 by the time we started to say, and she said it first, not me. She said, I don't think we have a choice, Ray. I think we're going to have to start a museum. What else could we do? And when you stop to think about it, what could you do other than sell them to somebody else or something? And so we feel really happy with what has happened here. And believe me, nobody does anything by themselves. You're acting like I'm being honored here to have all of you here. Bad memory and all, and it might be the last time. But you maybe think that I did it, and you just don't do anything by yourself. Douglas, my son, worked with me for 30 years, took care of me when we were in Russia. A lot of times um, we had, sometimes we were a little afraid, but it got easier and easier. And now it's getting harder and harder. So there's no way I can go into Russia without them probably arresting me and saying, we'll let you go when you give all those paintings back again. And so we're not foolish enough to do that now. And certainly I wouldn't subject my son going with me, and he won't let me go ever. And the last 10, 15 trips, he wouldn't let me go by myself. And it was a serious worry. It was a worry that I might get arrested for some who knows what. Maybe because now it's because we support Ukraine instead of Russia. It isn't that we don't love Russia, because we do, but we certainly don't love what's happening at the hands of Putin. I'm sorry.
Can you tell us about turning this building into the museum?
Yes, I told you how we got it. And I remember what was the architect again?
Sorry?
The architect.
Oh, Julie Snow.
Julie Snow was an incredible architect. She came and made a presentation to her, and we talked to every other major architect also to get a bid from them. And Julie Snow won, and she came in, added this part here. Also, we wanted to keep the vaulting of the around the windows, and over here, of course, from the outside, you know that there's colored glass windows. You can see it from the outside. On the inside, they're covered, but with Douglas, it was his idea to the architect that we leave a little opening up there so that there was a light that we could, so from the outside, it looks like it still has those stained glass windows, but they don't show from this side. We lost a lot of space by doing it the way we did it, but I think it's pretty exciting, isn't it?
When did this building open as the Museum of Russian Art?
The really first opening of it was we had about 100,000 square foot building in
Bloomington.
Bloomington. I knew that. And we were only there 10 years. So we loaned a little of that space to begin the museum and had several shows. And then when we were able to find a home for it, this home, then we moved, and we're pretty happy about where
What
we are.
year was that? Maybe you said that.
Well,
2004?
what is this, the 20th anniversary or 21st anniversary of our?
Last year. Last year?
Was it? What?
2005, she's saying. So that 20th anniversary,
Yeah, so-
2025.
Yeah. So we've been here 20 years, and it really is amazing to me because it seems like just yesterday that we started. But I want to tell you this, that I'm writing a book about it, and you can probably tell that I need some help with that. and of course, all of you in your ways will be helpful. Masha, I meet with her at least 2 hours every Sunday, working on the book. When during the pandemic, I wrote probably 150 pages of what will, you know, I could write then. I can't write as well now. I warned her that I might not be able to do this tonight. And she said, "Oh, yes, you can." I said, "Well, it's easy for you to say." So anyway, um,
those pages and the story that you and Masha are working on, it's the story that you're telling us now in some either longer or shorter. This story.
yeah,
Yeah.
I'm going to tell you there are 3 reasons why you would have said if you'd thought about it that I should never have done this.
Should never have done
I should
bought
never
this
have
art.
started collecting Russian art. I wasn't really.
You have a lot of notes, Ray.
Let's get
Is
to
the whole book in there?
Yeah. Hey, we're having fun, aren't we? Okay. There were 3 reasons. There were 3 reasons why I should not have done it in the beginning. I thought to myself, okay, I don't know how to speak Russian. Going to Russia, going to deal with maybe hundreds of artists, and I don't know how to speak the language. I also didn't really know a lot about art. Say nothing about Russian art. Okay. Then what was the third one?
I don't know, but you say you didn't know a lot about art, but I mean, you had a gallery, you were selling art, so
The third
you.
one is I didn't have any money. To be
That
speak,
makes perfect sense.
when you stop to think about it, I didn't save enough from my $22,000 a year salary as a pastor to buy millions and millions of dollars worth of art, tens of millions of dollars worth of art. How did I do that? It's a little at a time. But anyway, those are the 3 reasons why I should not have done it. But I'll give you the 3 reasons why I should. The advantages that I had, those were disadvantages. Didn't speak the language, didn't know art, and
Didn't have any money.
didn't have any money. So my 3 advantages, however, were that I didn't speak the language, and that I didn't know very much about art, and that I didn't have very much money.
This is the entrepreneurial part, in case you didn't already know that.
So maybe you all could figure that out yourselves, but I'll help you if you want help. What's the first one now?
You didn't speak Russian.
Okay, what if I had? What if I decided, oh, before I go, I better learn how to speak Russian? Well, right, yeah, that's simple. When I would go to an artist and practice my Russian, which would be obviously very poor because you don't learn it overnight and you don't learn the kind of words that you would need to talk to an artist. You'd feel foolish and you wouldn't. So I decided, well, I can't. The way to get around that is that I'll employ an art historian who not only spoke Russian but spoke English too.
And
That
knew the
person-
art language.
Right. So I didn't speak it at all. So I got an expert here on my right, and I've got an expert on my left, and I make sure that they tell me exactly what's going on, and then I respond. And what the artist hears me saying through them makes me sound really smart. The way I would have sounded had I tried to learn the language, you can imagine. It wouldn't be the same. Um, then the second advantage I had was that I never studied art, say nothing about Russian art. And if I had studied Russian art, I know what they would have said. Well, don't bother to collect Russian art. It's all propaganda. No question about it. There wasn't anybody saying I should do that. Nobody. Now, the third advantage I had was that I didn't have very much money. I didn't have any money to do the kind of job that I need, the kind of money that I needed to do what I wanted to do. Because if I had all kinds of money to spend by what ended up being tens of millions of dollars, I would have hired somebody to go do it for me. I had a uh, I had a dream about what I could do. You can't hire somebody to go and live your dream. You just can't do that. I had fire in the belly. You can't hire somebody and expect them to do that. And you also can't expect them to be willing to run up and down 10 floors. If you got enough money, you're going to hire somebody else to do that. And the artist studios were always at the top of the buildings and the apartment buildings that they maybe lived in. So while on the one hand I had three disadvantages, they happened to have been the same list of three advantages. Does that make sense? See, that makes sense.
Yeah, that's right.
I don't always make sense.
When you look back on this now, both the museum and the collection, what are the most significant things that matter to you?
Well, it's hard for me to believe that we are the only museum in the United States, and maybe the only one in the world that is exclusively Russian art. That's pretty satisfying to me in the middle of the night when I can't sleep. Wow. We're the only ones in the world. And the reason I say that is there was only one other one that was exclusively Russian, and that was in Moscow. And he started it because of me. But he was a banker, and he and his brother owned big banks. And they built a beautiful museum building. But guess who had been there collecting the art before him? And so no matter what the artist was, I had better ones. And it's sort of satisfying for me to think we moved, we did it when we did it, even though we didn't know always what we were doing.
Masha talked a little bit about Geli Korzhev, but tell us a little bit about your experience with Geli personally over all the years you knew him. You knew right from the start that he was going to be someone amazing.
And I think it's very likely that one of the paintings that's going to go to the moon Well, let me ask you a question. What do you think the chances are if you saw a list of the 60, no, maybe 100 most expensive paintings ever sold? I'll tell you where it starts. It starts at 450 million. That was the highest one ever sold. I know the guy that auctioned it. I've sat with him in his place in London, in his flat, Douglas and I. It goes all the way down to 60 million is the, I think it's either the, I think that's the 100th one. Okay, 450 million to 60 million for one painting. This is. Now, what do you think the chances are that of the 12,600, which is the real number, 12,600 paintings that we brought from Russia, not one of those ever is going to be on that list? Did I miss every single one of them? There's one. And I know that's going to surprise you. But I think someday, I'll be dead and gone for decades maybe, but that painting is someday going to join that list. And there are other ones by
Other
Korzhev.
Korshevs that
Other
would be
ones
on
by
that list.
Korzhev that will do the same. But it's amazing. The guy that worked for us for about 4 years was probably the greatest auctioneer ever. He sold the first Vincent van Gogh for 24, 34 million back in, right around the time we landed on the moon, because I remember that. Now, Vincent van Gogh didn't ever sell any paintings during his life, except for one. When he shot himself and dragged himself to his bedroom apartment, the doctors say, were reported that they were stepping on his paintings that were lying on the floor in his bedroom. Only one painting ever sold. And in today's money, that would be $2,000. Today, if you had 200 million, you might be able to buy one. You can buy something smaller, but nobody wants to sell their painting. So how much is it worth when nobody would buy it? So
How many Korshevs did you have?
we had 200.
More than the Tretyakov, more than the museums in Russia.
Right. It's like Pam and I were talking about earlier that, you know, when you have an orchestra, the leader, the director comes out and he introduces usually the first violin player. And no matter how talented that person is, it doesn't matter. Could be absolutely a wizard. That person can't play a symphony. That person has to have help from all the ones from that value on down. Maybe to the guy who has the cymbals, who goes bam, bam, at the end of a symphony. But no question about it, one person can't perform a symphony. So you compare that to a collection of art. Yes, I think that's probably one of the most, if not the most, best painting to come from Russia. It was bought by somebody else. I tracked it down, and I bought it for a lot, okay? And then I sold it for a lot. And someday somebody will think that I gave it away, because I think that Geli Korzhev has that possibility. And that's tonight is the day 100 years ago that he was born. And he was a great friend. When I would go there, I would always try to remember that you don't cross the transom when he opens the door until you get through it. You don't shake hands through the door. And I learned that when I saw him do this, the first few times, and I realized, oh, so I asked about it. Oh, you don't do that. You don't walk through an artist's door with your arm out. You wait until you've gotten yourself in, and he's allowed you to be in, and then. So I learned a few things as I went along. Now I'm just in the process of forgetting them. But you know, if you want to know what the real pleasures were, is people like you guys, you know. There are people in here that. Did you turn it off, Ray? I've have some really good friends in the process of this. I wouldn't trade them for all the paintings. I mean,
Are you sure?
well, maybe that one. No, so anyway, maybe you have a question or two. Maybe you have a question or two to ask. Is that the time for that?
Sure.
No?
Sure.
Did you?
Michelle has a microphone, so if anyone has questions, she'll give you the microphone.
How did Masha end up landing here? Like, what was the connection that you had? And how did she?
Well, Dr. Zavialova got her doctor's degree from the University of Minnesota. So she was here in town. And she came to the museum, and she'll tell you all about it.
In 2002, so I started my doctoral program in 2001. In 2002, a friend of mine said, you know, there is a Museum of Russian art in town. I said, get out of here. No, it can't be. And so she took me to the Bloomington location, and I opened the door, and opposite me was myself as a young pioneer with the blonde hair and in a uniform and a red tie. I looked like her. She probably would be a little bit older than I would be that year. And then some more paintings. But that painting kind of blew me away. And just looking around, I realized how remarkable this collection was. And when this museum opened here in 2005, I came right from the start. I began to volunteer here. I was still doing my doctoral program. And then I learned that they were hiring. I applied. And I had my defense of my dissertation, the final project, it was May 31st, 2008. June 2nd, I was here already on the job because I applied and was hired before.
Masha, what originally brought you to Minnesota to go to school?
Well, I came here to go to school. So actually, I applied from Russia to go to, well, first in 1998, I came here on an exchange program. So it was a professional exchange through the State Department. I was with the university, and then someone said, why don't you apply to get a doctoral degree here? So I applied, got into the program. So I did not immigrate. So I came here to be part of that PhD program in 2001. Never regretted. This is my new home, the United States, and I love the country. And I know that you as Americans, you perceive it differently. I was thinking about it the other day. When I was getting my citizenship, I had to take the oath of allegiance. And you guys have not done this. And when you take an oath of allegiance, it's not just words. I thought, oh, it's just words. No, it's something quite deep and important. When you have to process that you become part of something different, and now it's yours. And the experience here at this museum is like just a wonderful, wonderful experience.
And here you still thought that I could do this, Masha. That was so she's not. I'm not saying she's not all there, but anyway, she gave me the opportunity to look at all of you again. Might be the last time. So,
Yeah, agreed.
you know, the painting that you saw of the young pioneer, that impressed you so much. Remember, she gave it a home for about 15, 20 years, and now I'm sad to say, oh no, I'm happy to say that her child in London has it hanging in her house. It's one of the
It
most
was
beautiful
Pam's
paintings.
painting, by Shapaev.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There'll come a time when people will go to London just to see it. Because, you know, sometimes a museum can be formed almost around the value of a certain painting. When you go to France, what do you go to see?
The Mona Lisa.
Yeah.
Before your question, I have a quick story about the young pioneer. My late husband and I were neighbors of Ray's. That's how we met him and learned about the art. And my husband really liked all of the art, so Ray and his staff brought quite a bit of art to our house and hung it in the house for us to experience and see what we liked and wanted to buy. I know there's Snickers out there going, right, this is how they do it. So Ray kept telling me they were coming the next week, this was a couple months later, to take the things we didn't want to buy. So I was sort of saying, okay, out of these 28 paintings he brought here, let's pick 4 and the rest can go back. So we're looking around, and he wasn't agreeing with me, but we were looking around the house, and we got to the young pioneer, which was very lovely, but very expensive. And I said, you know, Jack, we're not going to keep this painting. This is one of the ones we'll have on the list to send back. He sort of nodded his head, and I said, okay, let's put that on the top of the list. And he turned to me and said, that little girl is never leaving our house. Right?
She didn't.
That's right. Sorry. Go ahead.
And there were a lot of people who wanted us to talk you out of it. Anyway.
Question.
There is for Marianne. Ray, well, first of all, Pam, you bought that and then let it be here, and I'm so grateful. Myself and many of my girlfriends my age from high school and college, we relate to those girls so strongly. It is just one of my favorites, if not my favorite. Ray, you say that that is probably one of the finest pieces of Russian art of the period. Why? What is
Well, it isn't the
about
finest of the period necessarily. It's that I think it's a Geli Korzhev he did a bunch of paintings that they were called Turliki. He claimed that he started painting those because of one of his grandchildren wanted to have a strange looking painting. That wasn't really what happened. He's a genius. This is a political painting, actually, in a way. In other words, if if a Russian looks at that and they're in the government, they'll know who is who. And he was making a statement with that, so it's a little bit more important than just the average painting. And to say that it's a beautiful painting, I guess would probably a lot of you would disagree with that, but it's an amazingly important one. And I don't own it anymore. It's why it isn't that I'm just saying that for any financial reason. I don't own it. I just wish I had.
Dr. Engstrom has a question.
I just want to thank you so much for what you have been through to my life personally. Got to meet you down in Scottsdale, and I bought a Tom Barrow and a Gary Smith down there, and then you commented, one day that you were going to have an opening of Russian art. And I had a course of Russian history at St. Owen. And I went to that opening she had out in Bloomington, and it validated my romanticized notion of the Russian people, the landscape, and also having traveled in Scandinavia, the log buildings that are depicted in a number of the paintings were very. I've seen them in Norway and Sweden, but not in Finland, or in the Kola Peninsula. But they were the same, and the people. The people were, a number of them were blonde, Scandinavian looking, they looked finished, but there was a lot of movement from Sweden over to Russia and back and forth. So thank you.
Well, you're welcome, but Dr. E, you're 93, and how come you can be so lucid? And he amazes me all the time. So, anyway, thank you, folks. I love you all. Appreciate you.
I hope I can ask it clearly. So I'm intrigued by your story and how you were sort of attracted to collecting Russian art. I'm aware of how authors oftentimes, when they write a story, something from history, they'll oftentimes say that they feel like they were chosen by these people's experience, and then they were sort of a conduit of writing their story. And I don't know if I've been clear, but I've heard authors say that they feel strongly that they've been sort of channeling that story and getting it out to the world. I couldn't help but think there's a piece of that, your role in here, where you sort of almost, that channel for getting this art here to the US and out of Russia.
I feel sometimes like it helps me a little bit with the idea of retiring, because I did have a dream. I write about that dream, and now that it seems like a lot of things actually happened, and so it makes it a little easier for me as I start not to remember a lot of it, but still to be reminded of it every time I come here. And every once in a while, even have a good idea about something, still. But I don't know if I'm writing it for someone else when I think about it, but I am writing a dream that could be a lot of other people's too, and I just don't know. So.
Any other questions?
Thank you all for coming.